Hello, and welcome to the Holistically Awakened podcast. I'm your host, Laurence. Today, we're talking about your shadows and how they can really take you into deeper healing. I know that shadow work is, trending. There's a lots of talk about it online, and maybe you've done shadow work before, maybe you haven't. But most of the time, shadow work and shadows come with this negative connotation. And today I kind of want to shine a light on a different perspective on shadows. So, if you're not familiar with me or my work, I started as a holistic nutritionist because I had so many health problems and I started to slowly heal until I came to like a wall and I just wasn't making any more progress. And I actually developed like orthorexia, emotional eating, binge eating, and I was getting really obsessed about the food. And this is what brought me to the mindset work and then deeper into somatic healing and the subconscious mind and all of these other modalities and aspects of healing because I was really just focusing on the physical, but I was missing the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual slash energetic. And so this is why now I have this holistic approach when it comes to my coaching and healing and women's health, where I look at all of these aspects. Because if one is missing, then we won't be able to be fully optimized or healthy or fulfilled, etc. And so my path brought me to this deeper work, and a lot of it was around shadow work too. And for me, I kind of got into a dark place where I started to get really obsessed and I started to learn about like, oh my God, the subconscious mind is like holding the key to so much. Like the subconscious mind is so powerful. So what's in the subconscious mind is actually very influential in our life. And this is an amazing thing to learn because when you have the tools to shift the programs in the subconscious mind, and I've talked about this in other episodes, um, and I'll link below if you want to sort of dive deeper into like how to reprogram the subconscious mind, all of that. But this is really amazing if you do have the tools and the resources and even the awareness. But you can also get stuck in the like fixer and the obsession over healing. And this is where I fell into this trap where I was like, oh, okay, I need to like delete all of these programs in the subconscious mind and all of this crap and all of these emotions and all of these learning beliefs and all of these thoughts. And basically I need to change everything about myself and then I can finally have what I want and I can be happy and la la la. And instead, I started to become really obsessed about it and it was focused on again fixing. So my attention was going towards what's wrong with me and it was coming from this place of like deep unworthiness and shame, and that defeats the purpose of this whole work because this work is supposed to guide us back into the wholeness of who we are. And if we're coming from a place of, I'm not good enough and I need to fix this so I can be good enough, then we're going to go round and round in circles because we need to learn that lesson. And shame can't heal. Shame will just perpetuate the loop cycle of shame. And so this is where I really fell into that trap. And that's something that I really had to look at. And it's something that I see a lot of people fall into as well. And it really comes down to this sense of worthiness. And we're really taught to shame ourselves and to change a lot of the time. And it doesn't work. I'm sure you've tried it before. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't work. It's not sustainable. And it's, yeah, not something that is going to be giving you a continual source of motivation or drive because it's really not something that is promoting any of those things that we want. And so this is what I want to talk about today when it comes to why our shadows can actually hold the key to our healing, and why shaming and hating ourselves into change is not the answer. And this is where the shadows, or the dark parts of ourselves, the parts that we've repressed or hidden or shamed, they need to be accepted. Because when we shame them, when we make them wrong, this is where they hold power over us. And if you want to dive deeper into this aspect, I highly recommend the book Existential Kink. I can also link that in the show notes. It's one of the most profound books I've ever read because it has an amazing perspective on shadow work and the subconscious mind. And when we hide these parts of ourselves, they actually have more control over us. And so we're more at the mercy of them. Versus when we accept them, that's when there's less of this resistance. And we're not like basically in denial of parts of ourselves. Because the thing is, they're in our subconscious. And just because we shame them, or we shove them under the rug, or shove them in the closet, we hide them, we blame them, that doesn't make them go away. And so this is where acceptance is really the key here. When we label these parts of ourselves as wrong or bad, then again, we keep them repressed and suppressed and hidden. And really, the thing is, they're only heavy and dark, because lots of these parts of ourselves can really feel heavy and dark, but it's because we don't look at them. So, for instance, it can be like you're home alone. This has happened many times to me, where you're home alone and there's this object in the dark and it looks like it's a monster, or it looks like a person, and you're like, your nervous system is kind of freaking out and your mind is kind of playing trips on you. Like, is that a person? And then you turn the light on, and it's just like a soccer ball and like a hat or whatever. And the same thing goes with like the parts of ourselves that are internal and that are hidden. They seem to be like bigger and heavier and darker and all of these things. But when we turn a light on, then we can actually see them for what they are. And when we start to communicate with them and start to engage with them, then the heaviness starts to dissipate. And this happens all the time with my clients, where we look at these parts and we start to become curious without judgment. We start to see them, we start to hear them, and the heaviness just starts to melt away. And that's what happens when we shine a light. Because when you're hating a part of yourself or the issue or the habit, you're actually hating yourself, because you're hating the part of you that's running the issue under the surface. So, for instance, there's these different shadow parts that might have like habits, or they might be self-sabotaging you, or they might even be people pleasing, or um procrastinating. There's so many things that these parts um are kind of connected to. So for instance, a lot of the time with my clients, we'll look at like patterns or habits that they want to let go of, whether it's like people pleasing or self-sabotaging or unhealthy habits that they just keep doing but they don't want to do it. It's often because these parts of themselves are are the ones who are initiating these habits, these actions, these behaviors. And it's for a specific purpose, but we don't actually know the purpose until we discover that. And this is what parts work does, where we start to look at all of these parts of ourselves and see like what are their intentions and what are they actually trying to accomplish for us. And that's where we can start to meet their needs and adopt healthier ways of meeting those needs and reintegrating those parts back into wholeness. So we're all on the same playing field, versus one part of us is like scared of putting ourselves out there because whatever. And then the other part of ourselves is like, I really want to put myself out there because I want to like grow a business or whatever. And then we have this conflict internally because it's like this tug of war. And that's where, when we do parts integration, we can come together and both parts can collaborate. So there's no more of this tug of war conflict internally, because that's draining shit. That is this conflict, this tug of war that's going on inside of your body. inside of your subconscious. And oftentimes we're not aware of it. And so what we do is we shame ourselves. We try to motivate ourselves. We try to discipline ourselves, try to put more rules. But this is not a sustainable solution. And that's what happened with me with my emotional eating, my binge eating, where I did all of these rules. I took all of these strategies from people and I was more strict on myself and I punished myself more. And it just kept going until I started to look at these parts of myself. And little by little, I didn't need, I didn't have the need to binge eat anymore. And now it's just not something that ever happens. So going back to the shadows, these parts of ourselves are asking to be seen without judgment. And when I talked about the parts, this is what happens when these protective parts, because they're really trying to protect you from something. And most often, this is related to childhood, where we learned something, we saw something, we experienced something. We don't want to experience it again. So these parts are protecting us from rejection, from abandonment, from whatever. And they are no longer aligned, though, because before they protected us and they served us, they had a purpose. But it's almost like that version of us is still running the show. Maybe it's an 8-year-old, 4-year-old, 12-year-old version of us. Now we are an adult and we have these bigger visions and missions and we see the world differently. We've learned a lot. We've created our own beliefs. We've, decided to create a new sort of paradigm for ourselves, or we've decided that things get to be different for us or whatever. And so now these protective parts of ourselves aren't in alignment with what our current and true or higher self want or what they're really all about. So, for instance, you may dream about create a different life or you want to step towards your purpose, but when it actually comes to doing something, you shut down, you retract, you procrastinate. Maybe you want to stop scrolling before bed or eating unhealthy foods or avoiding exercise. You want to create healthy routines, yet you just can't seem to do it. You just revert back to what you've always done. And you're just like, I don't understand why I can't just do it. So it's like you're fighting this invisible battle inside of yourself because you are. It's like these different parts of yourself are not in alignment and they are in conflict. And so now what we want to do is we want to align all of those parts of ourselves with our higher self, with the greatest good, with the highest intention for us in a way that will support us and really give us everything that is in alignment with our highest good, really. Because the things that were decided way back when these protective parts became a thing, they no longer are true for us. They no longer serve us for where we want to go. They kept us safe when we needed to survive, but now we're going beyond that. So, this is what can happen when you try to step towards the life that you want. These parts will try to stop you, and it will be very sneaky and subconscious. And it's going to be very like your ego is going to have really good excuses and arguments. And it can seem like you just don't have motivation or willpower or discipline or whatever. But it's because of these internal parts, this internal conflict going on. So, how do we shift this? So, as I mentioned before, it's really about bringing these parts back into alignment, it's reintegrating them. And there's really this acceptance piece around those parts that were neglected and abandoned, repressed. So, we work with all of our parts so that they have a voice. So, this is a big part of the parts work that I do with my clients because we're acknowledging them. We're actually letting them express themselves. Because if we're like shoving this part of us into the corner and, slamming the door in its face and it's having a tantrum and it's even like a child, it's like having a tantrum and we just tell it to shut up, it's probably going to get louder and louder. It's not going to get any better. And so this is where we get to allow it to be seen and heard. So that's really the first part. And express like what it needs to express because it probably never had that chance. We also are signaling safety to our bodies that it's safe to express itself. It's safe to be with this part of ourselves. It's safe to allow it to be seen because maybe in the past it wasn't. Because when we shame, we deny, we suppress, we avoid these parts, they don't disappear. They influence our lives unconsciously because they're asking to be seen by you. And so they're going to try to keep getting your attention. So it's not about shaming yourself to change. It's really about getting curious about the parts that don't want to cooperate or cooperate in the way that you want them to. For instance, they're, in conflict. It's reintegrating these parts back into the wholeness of who you are through acceptance. And so this parts work that I do with my clients really hones in on these different steps to bring all of these parts back into alignment with ourselves. But we are the ones who become in charge. They are not in charge anymore. So that you can then lead your life consciously without these parts subconsciously playing out in the background. So I know this was a lot, but I hope that this made sense in terms of the shadows and the parts. And what it really comes down to is letting go of this shaming tactic to change ourselves. And it's really about becoming curious. And I think it'd be really helpful to think about these like parts of ourselves that come up or that are not cooperative, quote unquote, as children or other people, because we tend to be kinder and more open and curious when it comes to other people versus ourselves. We're just like shutting it down. So, what could change for you if you were no longer having this internal conflict within? If you no longer shamed yourself to change, but you actually like became open and curious about yourself and more loving towards yourself to change for the better of yourself, not because you need to fix yourself to be good enough. This is something that we dive deeper into inside of my one-on-one coaching and mentorship program, Unleashed and Untamed, which is launching next week. I am so excited about it. If you are interested, if you're curious about learning more, you can apply in the show notes and I will reach out to you about booking a call just to explore if this container could be the right fit for you. It is a one-on-one intensive coaching container. You get access to my online course, The Intuitive Woman, as well. More details will be coming next week, but this is a big part of the work that we do together. And there's so much more than that, of course, but it's really the inner healing, the deeper healing work that is missing for a lot of women, where they're really trying harder and they're doing all the things and they're trying to like outthink their behaviors or their feelings, and it's just not working. They're feeling more burnt out, more resentful, less connected, all of these things. So if you're interested, you can apply in the link in the show notes. More details will be coming next week, so stay tuned for that. And I'd love to hear if you have any takeaways. Please share with me on Instagram. Please share the podcast if this is something that you're enjoying and you think other people can benefit from. I really love to share these podcasts because we go deeper than the content I can share on social media. And it's really about sharing things that a lot of people don't talk about, but a lot of people need to hear. And I love to, start a conversation around this as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out to share your takeaways, what's coming up for you. If you have any thoughts, if you have any questions, thank you for listening to the episode. And I will talk to you next time on the podcast.